Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox. I'm the Compliance Evangelist, and I'd like to welcome you to a special 5-part podcast series on international due diligence investigations, finding the needle in the corporate haystack. This series is sponsored by Infortal Worldwide. Established in 1985, Infortal Worldwide has conducted over 2 million investigations globally. Infortal specializes in investigations for FCPA vendor risk management, mergers and acquisitions transactions, board due diligence, and screening of executives internationally, in addition to routine background checks. Infortal has implemented tried and tested methodologies combined with new tools to reveal 30% more hidden and undisclosed information other than investigations. For more information, check out their website, www.infortal.com. Over the next 5 podcasts, we will be exploring such issues as when basic due diligence is no longer enough, given some recent government, FCPA, and international anti-corruption enforcement actions. What do CCOs need to know and want to know? What is and what is not working in due diligence investigations today? M&A successor liability issues, reputational damage, how they might be avoided by more robust investigative due diligence. And finally, with the changes in global policies regarding data privacy, the changes in technology with AI, what are some of the innovations and progress we will see in investigative due diligence going forward? Throughout this series, I am joined by Candace Tao. Candace is the founder and CEO of Infortal Worldwide. I know you will find this series useful and instructive. This series on international due diligence investigations, finding the needle in the corporate haystack, is a special presentation of the Compliance Podcast Network. Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox, back again for episode 3 of our 5-part exploration of international due diligence investigations, how you might find the needle in the corporate haystack. As always, I'm joined by Candace Tao, the president and CEO, founder of Infortal. And today we're going to take up the topic of what is and what is not working in due diligence investigations. So Candace, first of all, welcome back.
Thank you, Tom. Great to be back.
So Candace, if I'm sitting in the CCO chair, what are the key results that I need, but I'm not getting from the typical due diligence provider?
Well, that's very important. Most chief compliance officers are really working with extremely limited due diligence data. And that really worries me because they feel that they have all the information they need to make proper risk assessments, and they don't. And I'm sure that I'm not the only one that knows that. I'm sure most investigators with any amount of significant experience in this field would know the same. And so that would include the regulators. They have investigators with substantial experience who would say the same types of things. So this is just the beginning. And so they're using very limited data to inform and rank risks. And so that's a concern. What other types of information that they're not getting? They may be seeing 1 to 5% of the issues that are out there, but they're not seeing the 35% of issues that they could readily see if they were doing a slightly more detailed due diligence program, rather than the one-size-fits-all approach to, we'll just do level 1 for everybody.
So Candace, what are the types of measurements you would suggest that demonstrate the effectiveness of a due diligence program?
Well, I would say if they're not seeing at least 30% negative information, and by that I'm talking about bribery and corruption related issues. And sometimes there are other issues too. For example, conflict of interest. Is that an issue? It may or may not be. In some situations, it would be, certainly. And in others, it could be innocuous. So they're not getting any type of information that may be beyond the very, very basics. Is the company there? Does it exist? Is it a staged situation? where maybe it's just a front, it's an office front, and I'm not talking about shell companies now, but actual companies that misrepresent even having any facility on the ground. We see that a great deal. We see that in many countries. Latin America, we see it in Africa. It's very, very common in Africa to see, in many different countries in Africa, of course, to see that type of situation. They're not seeing extended relationships between people. In Latin America, you see a lot of family-run enterprises, and so they're not picking that up necessarily, where one company that they're doing business with, actually that family may have multiple businesses and their other businesses are corrupt. How does that impact the primary relationship? Does it impact it or not? And oftentimes you won't see that in level 1 due diligence. So there's very, very important red flags that are missing. And so they may not even know who the real owners are. And I kid you not, Tom, there are many cases where we see companies that are sent to us for due diligence investigations where we don't even have the correct name of the company. The company name is wrong. The names of the executives are wrong, or they're mistranslated into English, not by us, but of course, but by the field people that report to the client company. And so when that's done automatically or it's done through data aggregation, that company may be not even researched correctly because they don't have the right information. It can be that they've got the wrong company name, and so you've got a false negative. There's no information about the company, but actually they've been reporting a different company. So that's another type of issue for some chief compliance officers to be concerned about. Does the company actually exist? Are there actually employees working there? You wouldn't know that from the basic due diligence that occurs. So it's really about sharpening up the due diligence program to find a little bit more effective way of getting to where the risks are. It doesn't have to cost a fortune to do that. It may only be a few $100s more to find real meaningful information.
Candace, you actually started with those last couple of statements into the question I wanted to ask you next, which is, what is a strategy? Once again, sitting in my CCO chair with my CCO hat on, what would you advise me as a strategy that you would say really works around due diligence investigations?
I think a very good strategy would be certainly do the level 1 due diligence, but consider adding to that, building on that basis, deep due diligence searches, deep dive searches on media and the internet. So the internet is about 500 times greater than a typical Google search. And I've had surprising number of compliance officers and managers who've said, well, we've also done Google searches. And that may be surprising to hear even today that happens. But they couldn't find information. That's because they're not looking in the right places. So deeper media searches and deeper internet searches can yield about 35% more information than just the basic level 1 search. So that would be a strategic way of incorporating data that helps you to rank risk. And I think it's vital. And I think it's one of the things that's not really happening today. Companies are leaving that far too late in the process. And so they are doing it in the deep dive due diligence phase, which would be level 3 type investigations, where they're looking at how do we find everything there is about the company. And that would come up for, companies that already have shown a red flag in the basic due diligence level. But again, you're not seeing all of the red flags when you only do basic due diligence. And so, yes, they're doing deep due diligence on the red flags, but not enough of the red flag issues are coming to their attention at level 1.
So right. So how does you take that then and help a CCO not only use that information, but actually I guess what I'm trying to get at is how does a CCO use that information in making any type of assessment going forward?
Yeah, so long term, if you look at that picture slightly longer term, the CCO needs to perform a more meatier, if you will, due diligence than the level one that we're seeing. But they also need to repeat those steps every year or two, perhaps every 3 years for lower risks. So ongoing monitoring of third parties is also an essential component of doing effective due diligence on third parties. And today we don't see enough of that happening. And I think that that's tripped up a few companies in recent times where they have perhaps done a basic due diligence program and they felt they had a solid compliance program around that and around their internal controls and accounting provisions. So they felt that they've got a solid compliance program, where in fact they've had a very lopsided view of their third parties. And you also have regional instability in a lot of countries that are high risk profile. Certainly in a lot of African countries, but also various areas of the world where you have instability. And so a vendor or third party that's been not corrupt, not functioning in a corrupt manner, with changes in political upheaval in a country, find themselves now having to do business in a completely different manner. And suddenly now you've got a bribery situation going on, or permitting bribes to get permits through that didn't perhaps happen a few years beforehand. So the ongoing monitoring is really vital to a solid compliance program.
So, Candace, unfortunately, we're near the end of our time for this episode. I've been visiting today with Candace Towle on our what is and what is not working in due diligence investigations. I hope you'll join us again for our next episode, where we take a look at sort of current events, timely topics, reputational damage, M&A successor liability issues, and some other things. So, Candace, once again, I look forward to continuing the conversation.
Thank you, Tom.
Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox. Thank you for joining me on this episode of International Due Diligence Investigations, Finding the Needle in the Corporate Haystack. I hope you'll join me again tomorrow for our next episode. Also, if you have any questions, please feel free to contact Infortal at their website, which is www.infortal.com. This 5-part podcast series has been a special presentation of the Compliance Podcast Network.